I walked into my office on compliance day, expecting the usual routine. Instead, I found a thick, sealed envelope from HR sitting on my keyboard like a coiled snake. The company letterhead screamed official business, and someone had stamped confidential in red across the front. My hands reached for it, but my manager Greg appeared beside me, his face drained of color. He leaned close and whispered 5 words that changed everything. "Don't sign it." I turned to him confused. "Why?" His voice dropped even lower. "Look who's CC'd." I flipped the envelope over with trembling fingers and felt my stomach drop when I saw the names. 5 minutes later, 2 people from legal walked through our department doors, heading straight toward my desk. Patricia from legal stood in front of me like a wall of ice. She was probably in her early 50s, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent, and her expression revealed absolutely nothing. Behind her stood Brandon, a younger associate who kept glancing at the floor like he wished he could disappear through it. My name is Kylie, by the way. I'm 29 years old, and until that moment I thought I was doing pretty well for myself. I had been working as a compliance analyst at this mid-sized pharmaceutical company in New Jersey for 3 years. I loved my job. I was good at it. I believed in doing things the right way. Patricia gestured toward conference room B with a motion that made it clear this was not a request. Greg tried to follow us, but Patricia stopped him with a single raised hand. "Manager presence not required," she said in a tone that could freeze water. I walked into that conference room alone, my heart hammering against my ribs. The door clicked shut behind me with a sound like a judge's gavel. Patricia slid the envelope across the polished table. Her perfectly manicured nails tapped it once. "Read it and sign it, please." Her voice was professional, detached, like she was asking me to approve a lunch order. I picked up the envelope with hands that would not stop shaking. Inside was a document with a title that made my vision blur: Voluntary Separation Agreement with Admission of Misconduct. I read the words, but they did not make sense at first. My brain refused to process what I was seeing. The document listed 3 specific HIPAA violations allegedly committed by me over the past 6 months. It claimed I had accessed patient records without authorization. It stated that I had sold confidential data to a competitor. It included dates, times, and IP addresses that supposedly traced back to my computer workstation. The language was precise, legal, damning. If I signed this paper, I would be admitting to federal crimes. In exchange, the company offered me 2 weeks of severance pay and a non-disclosure agreement. They promised not to press criminal charges. If I refused to sign the document, made it very clear that they would terminate me for cause and refer the matter to federal prosecutors. The FBI would get involved. My career would be destroyed. I might go to prison. I looked up at Patricia. "This is insane. I never did any of this." I heard my voice crack on the last word. Patricia's expression did not change by even a millimeter. "The evidence is conclusive," she replied. Brandon slid a folder across the table toward me, still avoiding eye contact. I opened it and found printouts of login records, file access logs, and timestamps. Some of the records looked familiar because I had accessed those files, but I had done so for completely legitimate work purposes. I was a compliance analyst. Accessing confidential files was literally part of my job description. I tried to explain this, but Patricia cut me off like she was swatting away a fly. "You have 2 hours to make your decision," she announced. She stood up, smoothed her already perfect skirt, and walked out. Brandon hesitated for just a second, opened his mouth like he wanted to say something, then followed her out the door. The click of the latch echoed in the empty conference room. I stumbled back to my desk in a daze. The office suddenly looked different, like I was seeing it through water. Coworkers glanced at me, then quickly looked away. The air felt thick and hard to breathe. Greg appeared at my cubicle wall and pressed a folded piece of paper into my hand without saying a word. His eyes were frightened. I unfolded the note in my lap where no one could see it. "Check who's CC'd. They're cleaning house. You're not the only one. Be careful." My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the paper. I looked at the CC list on the envelope again, really studying it this time. The names jumped out at me: Douglas, the chief financial officer; Amanda, the vice president of operations; Marcus, the head of IT security. These were not random people. These were the top executives at our company. Then something clicked in my memory like a key turning in a lock. 3 weeks ago, I had been running a routine compliance audit. I had found discrepancies in patient billing codes, not small errors, major problems. Millions of dollars in fraudulent charges to Medicare, procedures that were never performed but billed anyway. I had documented everything carefully and reported it to Greg, who promised he would handle it through proper channels. Now I understood. I had stumbled onto something massive, and they were trying to eliminate me before I could expose them. They were not just firing me. They were framing me for crimes I did not commit so that nobody would believe anything I said. If I was branded a criminal and a data thief who would listen to my allegations about Medicare fraud, I would be completely discredited. The 2 hours passed like 2 minutes. Patricia returned with Brandon trailing behind her like a shadow. I looked her straight in the eye and said the words that sealed my fate. I'm not signing this. I didn't do any of this. Patricia's face remained a mask. Then we proceed with termination for cause. She pulled out another folder from her briefcase, this one even thicker than the first. My stomach dropped even further, which I had not thought was possible. Inside were sworn statements from 3 of my coworkers. The first was from Jennifer in accounting. I barely knew Jennifer. We had maybe spoken 10 words to each other in the entire time I had worked here. Yet her statement claimed that I had approached her 6 months ago, asking suspicious questions about how to access financial systems without leaving audit trails. The second statement came from Derek in IT. I had grabbed coffee with Derek exactly once, maybe 4 months ago. His statement said I had asked him how to bypass security protocols. The third statement was from Lisa, someone I actually considered a friend. We ate lunch together at least twice a week. Her statement said I had joked about how easy it would be to steal patient data and sell it to competitors. These conversations never happened. None of them. Ever. I tried to tell Patricia this, but she talked over me like I was not even in the room. We have signed affidavits. We have digital evidence. We have multiple witnesses. Your employment is terminated effective immediately. Security appeared at the door. It was Thomas, a guard I saw every day and always said good morning to. He looked miserable. Patricia informed me that I was suspended without pay pending their internal investigation. I had 15 minutes to clear any personal items from my desk. My company laptop, my phone, and my security badge were confiscated on the spot. Those 15 minutes were the longest walk of shame I have ever experienced. I grabbed the few personal photos and the coffee mug my mom had given me for my birthday and put them in a cardboard box someone had found. People stared. Some looked sympathetic. Most looked away like I had a contagious disease. I kept my eyes down and focused on putting one foot in front of the other. Greg was nowhere to be seen. He had probably been ordered to stay away from me. Thomas walked me through the building to the parking lot. As we passed the executive corridor, I saw Douglas, the CFO. He stood in the hallway like he just happened to be there, but I knew better. He watched me walk past with my pathetic box of belongings. Then he smiled. It was the coldest smile I had ever seen on a human face. Should have taken the deal, Kylie, he said quietly. The words felt like ice water down my back. I sat in my car in the parking lot for probably 20 minutes, unable to turn the key in the ignition. My hands would not stop shaking. I pulled out my personal phone and tried to access my work email out of habit. Access denied. I tried the company portal. Account locked. I tried to call Greg. The call went straight to voicemail and his mailbox was full. They had cut me off from everything in less than an hour. All my work files, all my documentation of the billing fraud I had discovered, everything existed only on company systems that I could no longer access. I was completely isolated. My phone rang, startling me so badly I almost dropped it. The screen showed Ethan calling. Ethan was my boyfriend of 2 years, a software engineer who worked for a tech startup in Manhattan. He was steady, rational, and supportive. Right now I needed all 3 of those things desperately. I answered, and before I could even say hello, he started talking. Babe, what's going on? I just saw something on LinkedIn. Someone from your company posted about a security incident and an employee being terminated. Is that you? The dam broke. I started crying and could not stop. The whole story came pouring out in broken sentences and gasping breaths. The envelope, the accusations, the fake witness statements, the termination. Ethan listened to everything. And when I finally ran out of words, he said exactly what I needed to hear. We're going to fight this. We'll figure it out together. I promise. I believed him. I had to believe him because the alternative was drowning in despair right there in the parking lot. I drove home to my apartment in a fog. The next morning, I woke up with a plan. I was not going to roll over and let them destroy me. I was going to fight back, and I was going to win. The first thing I needed was evidence. Then I remembered something that made my heart leap with hope. I had made backup copies of the billing fraud evidence. I had always been careful about important work. Call it paranoia or professionalism, but I kept personal backups of critical files just in case something ever happened to the company servers. 3 weeks ago, when I first discovered the Medicare fraud, I had uploaded spreadsheets and screenshots to my personal cloud storage account. My evidence existed outside the company's control. I had proof of their crimes. I grabbed my personal laptop and logged into my cloud account, with hands that shook from excitement rather than fear this time. I navigated to the folder where I had stored everything. The folder was there. But when I clicked on it, my heart stopped. Empty. Completely empty. According to the timestamp, every single file had been deleted 2 days ago. 2 days ago, I had been at work nowhere near my personal computer. Someone else had accessed my account and deleted my evidence. I checked my laptop's security logs with growing horror. Strange login attempts from IP addresses I did not recognize. Remote access software had been installed without my knowledge. Someone had hacked into my personal computer, found my backup files, and erased them. The company's IT department, or someone they hired, had invaded my privacy and destroyed the one thing that could prove my innocence and their guilt. I sat staring at the empty folder on my screen, feeling the walls close in around me. Without that evidence, I had nothing. It was my word against theirs, and they had witness statements, falsified logs, and all the resources of a multi-million-dollar corporation. I had a cardboard box with some photos and a coffee mug. My doorbell rang, snapping me out of my spiral. I looked through the peephole and saw Lisa standing in the hallway. Lisa from my department. Lisa, who had signed a statement claiming I joked about stealing data. My first instinct was to not answer, but something about the way she stood there, shoulders hunched and eyes red, made me open the door. Lisa looked terrible. Her hair was uncombed, her eyes were swollen from crying, and her hands twisted together like she was trying to wring water from them. "Can I come in?" she asked, in a voice so quiet I barely heard her. I stepped aside and let her into my apartment. She walked to my couch and collapsed onto it like her legs would not hold her anymore. "I have to tell you the truth," she said, and then she started crying. "They forced me to lie about you." The whole story came tumbling out between sobs. 2 weeks ago, HR had called Lisa into a meeting. They showed her copies of her own private medical records. Her 8-year-old daughter had a serious heart condition that required expensive treatment and ongoing care. The company's insurance covered it, but the records showed exactly how much everything cost. Tens of thousands of dollars. Maybe hundreds of thousands over time. The HR representative, someone Lisa had never met before, had made things very clear. They could find problems with her insurance coverage if they needed to. Claims could be denied. Coverage could be dropped for various policy violations. Lisa was a single mother. Losing that insurance would be financially devastating. It might mean her daughter would not get the care she needed. So when they put the false statement in front of her and told her to sign it, she signed it. She had no choice. At least that was what she told herself. Lisa was not the only one. Jennifer from accounting had been threatened with exposure of a DUI arrest that the company had quietly helped her cover up 2 years ago. Derek from IT had been blackmailed with compromising photos someone had taken at a company party when he had too much to drink. The company had been systematically collecting leverage on employees for years. Dirty secrets, private information, anything that could be used to control people. When they needed false testimony or silence, they had a whole arsenal of pressure points to exploit. Lisa looked at me with desperate eyes. "I'm so sorry, Kylie. I know that doesn't mean anything. I know I helped them destroy you. But I was scared. I'm still scared." She told me that the rumors were already spreading. The company was preparing to file criminal charges. They were talking to the FBI, claiming I was part of a larger healthcare fraud ring. Their plan was to make me the scapegoat for their own crimes. If they could pin everything on me, any real investigation would stop. I would go to prison, and they would continue stealing millions of dollars from Medicare. After Lisa left, I sat with Ethan and took inventory of my situation. No evidence, no job, no access to company systems, witness statements against me. The company was building a criminal case to send me to federal prison. I checked my bank account. I had enough money to cover rent for maybe 2 more months if I was very careful. I definitely did not have enough for a lawyer, and federal criminal defense attorneys did not come cheap. Ethan suggested getting legal advice even if I could not afford full representation. Maybe a consultation would at least tell me what I was facing. I agreed because I had no better ideas. That night, my phone buzzed with an email notification. The sender was an encrypted email account I did not recognize. The message was short. They fired me too. Said I was complicit. I have copies of your original audit report showing the Medicare fraud. But I'm scared. They threatened my family. I can't help you openly. I'm sorry. It was from Greg. Attached to the email was a single PDF file. I opened it with hands that would not stay steady. It was my original audit report, the one I had submitted 3 weeks ago, documenting $15 million in fraudulent billing. Greg had kept a copy. He was risking his own safety to give me this one piece of evidence. The email account self-destructed 30 seconds after I downloaded the attachment. The message disappeared like it had never existed. I held onto that PDF file like it was a life preserver in the middle of the ocean. It was not much, but it was something. It was proof that I had reported fraud before they tried to frame me. It established a timeline that might possibly make someone believe me. I saved copies on 3 different drives and emailed it to myself at 2 different addresses. I was not going to lose this evidence the way I lost the others. 2 days later, I received certified mail. The return address was the United States Attorney's Office for the District of New Jersey. My hands shook so badly I could barely sign for the package. Inside was an official letter on government letterhead informing me that I was a subject of a federal criminal investigation. The potential charges made my vision swim: healthcare fraud under Title 18 United States Code Section 1347, HIPAA violations under Title 42 United States Code Section 1320D6, wire fraud under Title 18 United States Code Section 1343, combined maximum prison time 30 years. The letter ordered me to preserve all documents and not destroy any evidence. There was an interview scheduled at the FBI field office in 1 week. That same afternoon, FedEx delivered a thick envelope from my former employer. It was my formal termination letter, terminated for cause due to gross misconduct, violation of company policy, and criminal activity. No severance. Health insurance terminated immediately, effective the day of my suspension. The company was filing a formal complaint with the state licensing board to revoke my professional certifications. All stock options, which would have been worth about $20,000, were forfeited. They were taking everything. That evening, my building manager knocked on my door. He looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot and not meeting my eyes. He handed me an eviction notice. Someone he would not say who had filed an anonymous complaint with the landlord. The complaint claimed I was engaged in criminal activity. My lease had a morality clause buried in the fine print. I had 30 days to vacate the premises. I sat on my couch that night, surrounded by official documents that were systematically destroying my entire life. Federal criminal investigation, termination for cause, eviction notice. I had not eaten anything all day, but I was not hungry. I just felt numb, like my body had run out of the capacity to feel anything else. The next morning, a process server appeared at my door before I had even finished my coffee. I was being sued. My former employer had filed a civil lawsuit against me for $5 million in damages. The complaint claimed that my criminal activity had damaged the company's reputation, caused regulatory investigations, and resulted in lost business contracts. They were demanding compensation for all of it, plus legal fees. I could not afford a lawyer for the criminal charges. I definitely could not afford a lawyer for a $5 million civil lawsuit. but I scraped together enough money for 1 hour with a criminal defense attorney. His name was Charles. He was in his late 50s, with gray hair and tired eyes that had seen everything. His office was small but organized, framed law degrees on the wall, stacks of case files on every surface. I told him everything. The Medicare fraud I had discovered, the frame job, the witness statements, the federal charges, the civil lawsuit, the eviction, all of it came pouring out. Charles listened without interrupting, taking notes on a yellow legal pad with handwriting I could not read. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and studied me for a long moment. "This is the most professionally constructed frame job I've seen in 30 years of practice," he finally said. His voice was matter-of-fact, like he was discussing the weather. "Someone with significant resources and inside knowledge built this case very carefully. The evidence against you is circumstantial, but it's damning. The witness statements follow a pattern that suggests coordination. The timing is too perfect. This is corporate conspiracy, but proving that in court will be extremely difficult and extremely expensive." He explained what it would take to defend me. Federal criminal defense minimum, $150,000. Civil lawsuit defense minimum, $75,000. Private investigation to find evidence and witnesses, another $50,000. Total $275,000 that I did not have. Charles looked genuinely sympathetic, but he was also honest. Without significant financial resources, I was going to lose everything. His firm could not take the case pro bono. The partners would never allow it. I left his office feeling like I was drowning. I went home and tried to research other options. I spent hours online looking for similar cases, trying to find examples of people who had fought corporate retaliation and won. I found stories of other whistleblowers who had been destroyed by the companies they tried to expose. Most lost everything. Some went to prison. A few just disappeared from public records entirely. I found almost no success stories. The pattern was depressingly clear. Corporations almost always won. That evening, Ethan came over. He had been researching too. He showed me a news article on his tablet. My former company had just announced a major expansion. They had secured a $50 million contract with the state Medicaid program, the same program they had been defrauding. The fraud I had discovered was not just continuing, it was growing. They had positioned themselves to steal even more money from vulnerable people who needed health care, and I was the only person who knew about it. I was powerless facing prison, and they were celebrating a massive new opportunity to commit even more fraud. Ethan set down his tablet and took my hands. He had been offered a job opportunity in California, a great position at a growing company, but he had to leave in 2 weeks. He asked me to come with him. Start over on the West Coast, leave all of this behind. We could get married, build a new life together, forget any of this ever happened. I looked at him and realized what he was really asking. He wanted me to run away, to abandon the fight, to let the people who framed me win, to let them continue stealing from Medicare and destroying other people's lives. He loved me, I did not doubt that, but he could not watch me destroy myself fighting a battle I could not win. We argued. I told him I could not just walk away. He told me I was being stubborn and self-destructive. I told him this was about more than just me. He told me I could not save the world. The argument went in circles until we were both exhausted and angry. Finally, Ethan stood up and said he was sorry, but he could not do this anymore. He walked out of my apartment, and I did not try to stop him. I sat alone in the silence after he left. I had lost my job, my home, my savings, my reputation. Now I had lost my relationship too. I was completely alone, facing federal prison and financial ruin with no resources and no support. I thought about giving up. Just signing whatever they wanted me to sign, taking whatever plea deal they offered and trying to minimize the damage. Maybe Ethan was right. Maybe this was a battle I could not win. 3 days passed in a blur of anxiety and despair. I barely slept. I barely ate. I just sat in my apartment surrounded by moving boxes I had started packing for the eviction and tried to figure out what to do. Part of me wanted to fight. Part of me wanted to run to California with Ethan. Part of me just wanted to disappear entirely. Then I received a text message from an unknown number. The message had no words, just a photo. It was my mother walking out of her house in Pennsylvania. I stared at the image, my blood turning to ice. Another photo arrived seconds later. My younger sister picking up her kids from school in Connecticut. Another photo. My father leaving his office building in Philadelphia. Then finally a text message. Back off or they're next. I called my parents immediately, hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. I tried to warn them without completely terrifying them. Mom, I need you and Dad to be really careful for a while. Lock your doors. Pay attention to anyone following you. My mother's voice filled with concern. Kylie, what's wrong? You sound terrible. Are you okay? I could not tell her the truth without making everything worse. I'm fine, I lied. Just some weird stuff happening. Please just be careful. My father got on the phone. He sounded skeptical and a little annoyed. You're being paranoid, Kylie. Nobody is following us. What is this really about? I could not explain. How do you tell your parents that the corporation that's framing you for federal crimes is now threatening their safety? I mumbled something about identity theft and ended the call as quickly as possible. I sat staring at the photos of my family. These people were willing to hurt innocent people to keep me quiet. They had already destroyed my career and my life. Now they were threatening my family. I thought about the journalist I had contacted, Taylor from the Newark Star-Ledger. We had plans to meet tomorrow. I had been going to tell her everything, go public with the whole story. But if I did that, would they hurt my parents, my sister, my nieces? I sent Taylor an email canceling the meeting. I'm sorry. I can't do this. That was all I wrote. I deleted her contact information. I felt like a coward, but I could not risk my family's safety. The corporation had won. They had found the one thing that would make me back down. The next few days were the darkest of my life. I became obsessed with reading about other whistleblower cases online. I was looking for hope for one story of someone who had fought a powerful corporation and actually won. Instead, I found story after story of people who had been destroyed, lost their careers, their savings, their families. Some went to prison for crimes they did not commit. A few just vanished from public records, with no explanation of what happened to them. 1 week before my scheduled FBI interview, I received an email that changed everything. The sender was Marcus, the head of IT security, one of the people who had been CC'd on the original envelope. The subject line read, "We need to talk. I have what you need." Every instinct told me this was a trap. Marcus was part of the executive team. He was one of them. But desperation makes you do foolish things. I agreed to meet him at the public library downtown, figuring that at least there would be witnesses if something went wrong. Marcus arrived looking like he had not slept in a week. He was 42 years old, had worked at the company for 12 years, and had always followed the rules. He kept looking over his shoulder like he expected someone to jump out from behind the bookshelves. We sat at a table in the back corner where nobody could overhear us. He told me his story in a rush of whispered words. 3 months ago, Douglas, the CFO, had approached him privately, asked him to help construct a narrative about a problem employee, wanted Marcus to alter access logs and create false login records showing that this employee had accessed files without authorization. Marcus had refused. He told Douglas it was unethical and illegal, and he would not do it. Douglas had not argued. He had simply smiled and said, "You're either with us or against us." Marcus thought that was the end of it. But then he started noticing things. His personal emails were being read. His phone calls were being monitored. Someone went through his office at night. He realized they were looking for leverage against him the same way they had found it against Jennifer and Derek and Lisa. But Marcus had been careful. He had no secrets for them to expose. So Marcus had done something smart. He started documenting everything. He created encrypted backups of all the original, unaltered logs from the company servers. He recorded conversations careful to follow New Jersey's one-party consent law. He photographed documents. For 3 months he had been building a case collecting evidence of the conspiracy. He had proof that the evidence against me was fabricated. He had proof that the Medicare fraud was real and ongoing. He had recordings of Douglas, Patricia, and Amanda discussing the frame job. Marcus pulled a USB drive from his pocket and set it on the table between us. "Everything is on here. All of it. Enough to prove your innocence and send them to prison. But I need something from you." His face was drawn with fear and exhaustion. I need you to guarantee immunity for me. I need you to promise my family will be protected. I need you to move fast before they figure out I'm the leak. Can you do that? I looked at the USB drive like it was the Holy Grail. This was everything I needed. Proof, evidence, the truth. But Marcus was asking me for things I could not provide. I have no money, I told him honestly. No lawyer, no resources. I can't guarantee anything. I'm barely surviving. Marcus's face fell. He looked disappointed but not surprised. He pushed the USB drive across the table toward me anyway. This is a copy, he said quietly. I have the originals hidden somewhere safe. If something happens to me, use it. Please. I asked him the obvious question. Why are you doing this? Why risk everything to help me? Marcus looked me straight in the eye. I have 3 daughters. The youngest is 7. I can't let them grow up thinking their dad was a coward who let an innocent woman go to prison to protect his paycheck. I need to be able to look them in the eye. He stood up and walked away without another word. I sat there holding the USB drive, feeling its weight in my palm. It was a small thing, barely an ounce of plastic and metal, but it contained the truth. It contained my salvation. The problem was, I had no idea what to do with it. I could not go to the police because they would just refer it to the FBI. I could not go to the FBI because I was the one being investigated. I could not hire a lawyer because I had no money. I had the evidence I needed to prove my innocence, but I lacked any means to use it effectively. The day of my FBI interview arrived. I woke up at 5 in the morning, unable to sleep any longer. I had spent the entire night rehearsing what I would say. I decided this was my chance. My only chance. I would walk into that interview and turn it around. Instead of being the subject of their investigation, I would become a whistleblower. I would hand over Marcus's USB drive and expose the entire conspiracy. The FBI would see the truth and everything would change. I dressed carefully in my most professional outfit, trying to look competent and trustworthy. I put the USB drive in my purse, checking 3 times to make sure it was there. Then I drove to the FBI field office in Newark with my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The office was exactly what I expected: institutional, serious, intimidating. A receptionist checked my identification and directed me to wait. 20 minutes later, a woman in a dark suit appeared and introduced herself as Special Agent Diane Crawford. She was probably in her early 40s with short, dark hair and eyes that revealed nothing. She led me through secure doors and down a hallway to a small interview room. The room was bare except for a table and 4 chairs. Diane read me my rights, explaining that I was not under arrest, but that anything I said could be used against me. She began asking questions about the HIPAA violations I was accused of committing. Her tone was professional but cold. I felt like I was already guilty in her eyes. I interrupted her and said I had evidence of the real crime. Diane's expression did not change at all. I explained about the Medicare fraud and the frame job, talking faster and faster as desperation crept into my voice. Diane just made notes on her pad and asked where this evidence came from. I mentioned Marcus's name. She wrote it down and continued with her original questions as if I had not said anything important at all. Frustrated, I pulled the USB drive from my purse and set it on the table between us. Everything is here, I said. Recordings, documents, proof that I was framed, proof of the real fraud. Diane picked up the drive and set it aside without even looking at it. She continued asking her prepared questions about my alleged crimes. Are you even going to look at that? I finally asked, hearing the desperation in my own voice. We'll review it, Diane said in a tone that suggested she had no intention of doing so. But frankly, from my experience, people who are guilty often fabricate evidence of conspiracy when they're caught. The words hit me like a slap. I realized Diane had already decided I was guilty before I ever walked into the room. She was not interested in my evidence or my story. She was building a criminal case against me, and nothing I said was going to change her mind. I thought about what Lisa had told me. The company had been collecting leverage on people for years. Could they have leverage on FBI agents too? I asked Diane directly without thinking it through. You're friends with Patricia, aren't you? The lawyer at my company. Diane's face hardened. Who told you? That she demanded. I had not known for certain, but her reaction confirmed it. I made an educated guess based on her hostility, and I was right. Patricia and I went to college together. Diane admitted, her voice tight with anger. That doesn't affect my professional judgment, but I could see the truth in her eyes. Patricia had gotten to her first. Had told her version of the story. Maybe they really were friends. Maybe there was something more. Either way, Diane Crawford had already decided I was guilty and my evidence was worthless in her eyes. The interview ended badly. I walked out of that building in tears, feeling like I had just blown my last opportunity. I sat in my car for over an hour, unable to make myself turn the key and drive away. I had risked everything on that meeting. I had put all my faith in the FBI doing the right thing. Instead, I had been dismissed and discredited. I still had Marcus's evidence, but without someone willing to listen, it was useless. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, surrounded by moving boxes. In 3 more days, I would be evicted. In 2 weeks, I would probably be arrested. My entire life had collapsed, and I had no idea how to stop the fall. I thought about Ethan's offer to run away to California. Maybe he had been right all along. Maybe I should have just signed the papers on that first day and walked away with my small severance. At least then I would still have my freedom. I seriously considered giving up. Just calling the U.S. Attorney's office and telling them I wanted to discuss a plea deal. Maybe I could plead guilty to something minor, serve a year or 2 in minimum security prison, and try to rebuild my life afterwards. At least then the nightmare would have a defined end. At least then I would not be waiting for the other shoe to drop, wondering when they would arrest me and what my family thought of me. At 2 o'clock in the morning, my phone rang. I almost did not answer because I did not recognize the number. But something made me pick up. It was Greg calling from yet another burner phone. His voice sounded strained and frightened. I heard what happened with the FBI, he said without preamble. I made some calls. Greg explained that he had a former colleague who used to work in the U.S. Attorney's office. He had reached out to this person, breaking his own silence despite the risk. There was a prosecutor named Rachel Simmons who worked in the public corruption unit. She had been investigating pharmaceutical fraud in New Jersey for 2 years. She had been trying to build a case against my former company but did not have enough evidence. If I could get to her, Greg's friend could arrange an introduction. But it had to be completely secret. This is your last chance, Greg told me, his voice barely above a whisper. If this doesn't work, you need to seriously consider taking a plea deal and minimizing the damage. I asked him why he was still helping me after everything he had already lost. There was a long pause on the line. Because I should have backed you up from the beginning, he finally said. I should have been braver. This is me trying to do the right thing, even if it's too late. He gave me a time and place, 10 o'clock in the morning at a coffee shop in Princeton. Come alone. Tell no one. Bring everything you have. Then he hung up, and I heard the electronic sound of another disposable phone being destroyed. I sat holding my phone in the darkness, feeling something I had not felt in weeks. Hope. Tiny, fragile, probably foolish hope. But hope nonetheless. I spent the rest of that night organizing everything I had. Marcus's USB drive, Greg's PDF of my original audit report, my own notes and timeline. I made backup copies of everything on multiple drives and emailed files to 3 different email addresses. If something happened to me, at least, the evidence would still exist somewhere. I packed it all carefully in my bag and tried to sleep for a few hours. Tomorrow was my last chance at justice. The coffee shop in Princeton was small and quiet, the kind of place frequented by college students and professors rather than business people. I arrived 20 minutes early and ordered tea I had no intention of drinking. I sat at a corner table where I could see the door. Every person who walked in made my heart jump. I checked my phone every 30 seconds, watching the time crawl forward. At exactly 10 o'clock, a woman walked in and looked around the room with sharp, assessing eyes. She was probably in her late 30s, wearing a navy suit that was professional but not expensive. She carried a worn leather briefcase that looked like it had seen years of use. When she spotted me, she walked over without hesitation. Kylie, I nodded. She sat down across from me and extended her hand. Rachel Simmons. Let's talk. Her handshake was firm and businesslike. She ordered black coffee from the waitress and then turned her full attention to me. Tell me everything from the beginning. No detail is too small. I took a deep breath and started talking. I told her about my job as a compliance analyst, about discovering the Medicare fraud during a routine audit, about reporting it to my supervisor, about the sealed envelope on compliance day, about the frame job and the fabricated evidence, about the witness statements obtained through blackmail, about being fired and charged with federal crimes, about Marcus and his evidence, about everything. I talked for 45 minutes straight. Rachel listened intently, asking sharp questions that showed she understood exactly what I was describing. She took notes in a small notebook, her handwriting neat and precise. When I finally ran out of words, she leaned back in her chair and studied me for a long moment. "I've been investigating pharmaceutical fraud in New Jersey for 2 years," she said. "Your company has been on my radar. Multiple patients filed complaints about billing irregularities. We found patterns suggesting systematic Medicare fraud across several companies in the region, but we've had no internal evidence. No whistleblower. No way to prove the scope of the scheme." She paused and looked me straight in the eye. "You just handed me everything I need." I felt something tight in my chest start to loosen. Rachel explained the False Claims Act, speaking in plain language that I could actually understand. I could file what was called a qui tam lawsuit on behalf of the federal government. I would be an official whistleblower. If the case succeeded and the government recovered money, I would receive between 15 and 30% of the total amount as a reward. More importantly, I would receive full immunity from any criminal charges. Federal law protected whistleblowers from retaliation. Everything the company had done to me was illegal under those protections. "What about Marcus?" I asked. "The man who gave me the evidence. Will he be protected too?" Rachel nodded. "He'll get immunity as well. We'll protect both of you. This is what we do." I asked about my family and the threats they had made. Rachel's expression hardened. "Federal witness protection protocols if needed. We take threats against witnesses very seriously. People who threaten federal witnesses go to prison for a very long time." "How long will this take?" I asked, almost afraid to hear the answer. "I was being evicted in 3 days." Rachel smiled for the first time, and it was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of a predator about to pounce. "I move fast. We'll have search warrants by tomorrow morning. Once I had reviewed Marcus's evidence and confirmed it supported everything I was saying, things would happen very quickly." She pulled papers from her briefcase and spread them on the table. Whistleblower protection agreement, immunity from prosecution, cooperation agreement. My hands shook as I picked up the pen. I read every word carefully, even though I desperately wanted to just sign and be done with it. This was the most important decision of my life. I was not going to rush it. Finally satisfied that I understood what I was agreeing to, I signed my name. Officially, I was now a federal whistleblower. 2 days later, I woke up before dawn and turned on the news. The top story made my heart race. Federal agents were raiding the headquarters of my former employer. Live footage showed FBI agents in windbreakers carrying boxes of documents out of the building. Employees stood in the parking lot looking confused and frightened. News vans blocked the streets. Helicopters circled overhead. I watched the scene unfold on my television screen, barely able to believe it was real. That afternoon, the arrests began. Douglas, the CFO, was arrested at his home in front of news cameras. Patricia, the lawyer, was arrested at her office. Amanda, the VP of operations, was arrested at the airport trying to board a flight to Mexico. All 3 were charged with healthcare fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. The news showed their perp walks on every channel. I watched Douglas being led away in handcuffs and felt something I had not felt in months. Relief. Pure, overwhelming relief. Over the next week, the full scope of the scandal emerged. $115 million in fraudulent Medicare billing over 5 years. 17 employees involved in the scheme. Procedures that were never performed but billed anyway. Kickback arrangements with medical supply companies. False documentation. Altered records. Everything I had suspected and more. The evidence Marcus and I had provided gave prosecutors everything they needed to prove every charge. The U.S. attorney held a press conference. Rachel stood at the podium flanked by FBI agents and other prosecutors. She publicly identified me as the whistleblower who had exposed the fraud. She described me as courageous and as an example of integrity in the face of corporate corruption. She announced that all criminal charges against me were formally dropped. She stated that my termination had been retaliatory and illegal under federal whistleblower protection laws. I watched the press conference from my apartment, crying so hard I could barely see the screen. 3 months after the raid, the company agreed to a settlement with the Department of Justice rather than face trial. They paid $115 million in restitution to Medicare. They paid an additional $60 million in civil penalties, total $175 million. The company could not survive the financial blow or the scandal. They filed for bankruptcy. Hundreds of employees lost their jobs, and I felt terrible about that. But the alternative had been letting the fraud continue and letting more vulnerable people be cheated. Under the False Claims Act, I received a Whistleblower Award. The final amount was $30 million, representing 17% of the total recovery. When Rachel called to tell me the number, I had to ask her to repeat it 3 times. I could not process it. $30 million. More money than I had ever imagined having in my entire life. Money that represented justice and vindication, and the value that the government placed on people who told the truth despite the cost. The company's court-appointed trustee issued a formal public apology to me. My professional certifications were restored. My employment record was corrected to show that I had been wrongfully terminated. News stories celebrated me as a hero who had exposed massive healthcare fraud. Other victims of the company's billing scams reached out to thank me for stopping the theft. I received hundreds of letters and emails from people I had never met telling me I had done the right thing and that I had inspired them. Greg called me from his new job at another pharmaceutical company. "You did it," he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "You actually did it." I told him I could not have done it without his help, without the evidence he risked his career to preserve for me. He told me he was just glad he had found the courage to do something even if it came late. We promised to stay in touch. Marcus reached out to thank me for being brave enough to fight. He had received immunity and kept his job in the industry at a different company. His daughters were proud of him for standing up for what was right. He told me that moment in the library when he decided to give me the evidence was the moment he became the person he wanted to be. We talked about courage and fear and doing the right thing when it costs everything. I told him he had saved my life, and he told me I had saved his soul. Even Lisa contacted me, her voice shaking with emotion. She apologized again for signing the false statement. I told her I understood. She had been protecting her daughter, and I did not blame her for that. She told me she was in therapy working through the trauma of being coerced and manipulated. I encouraged her to be kind to herself. We were both victims of a system designed to exploit fear and silence truth. Ethan sent me a message from California. He said he was proud of me for fighting when he had told me to run. He said watching my story unfold had taught him something about courage and conviction. He understood if I did not want to reconnect, but he hoped we could at least be friends. I thought about it for a long time before responding. I told him I appreciated his message, but I needed time to figure out who I was now. Too much had changed. He understood. 6 months after the raid, I accepted a position as Director of Compliance for a nonprofit healthcare advocacy organization. The job paid well, though not nearly as much as my Whistleblower Award had already set me up financially for life. But money was not why I took the job. I took it because I wanted to use my experience to help other people. I created a support network for whistleblowers facing retaliation. I testified before Congress about the need for stronger whistleblower protections and better enforcement of existing laws. I found purpose in my nightmare. Looking back now, I can see how close I came to giving up. There were so many moments when I almost signed their papers or took a plea deal or ran away to California. The pressure was designed to break me, and it almost did. But something inside me, some stubborn refusal to let them win, kept me going, even when I had no logical reason to hope. I learned that courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is acting despite fear, despite the odds, despite everything telling you to give up. I learned that integrity matters more than comfort or security or even safety. I learned that corporations have enormous power, but truth is more powerful. I learned that justice is not guaranteed. You have to fight for it sometimes with everything you have. I learned that whistleblowing is terrifying and costly and brutally difficult. But it is also how we protect each other. It is how we create accountability. It is how we make powerful institutions answer for their crimes. The system tries to silence people who speak up. It makes examples of them to scare others into submission. But every person who finds the courage to tell the truth despite the cost makes it a little bit easier for the next person. The sealed envelope they left on my desk was supposed to trap me. It was supposed to silence me and discredit me before I could expose their crimes. Instead, it became the beginning of their downfall. They thought I would be easy to break. They thought a low-level compliance analyst with no resources and no powerful connections would just disappear quietly when they applied enough pressure. They were wrong. They underestimated me. That was their fatal mistake. I think about that moment sometimes, standing at my desk on compliance day holding that envelope with shaking hands while Greg whispered his warning. If I could go back and talk to that version of myself, I would tell her that the next 6 months would be the hardest of her life. I would tell her she would lose almost everything. But I would also tell her that she would survive. She would fight back. And she would win. I would tell her that doing the right thing is always worth it even when it costs you everything. Especially then. Have you ever faced a situation where standing up for what was right cost you something important? Or have you ever witnessed corporate wrongdoing and struggled with whether to speak up? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. Your experiences might help someone else who is facing that impossible choice right now. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button. Subscribe to hear more stories about ordinary people finding extraordinary courage. And share this with someone who needs to hear that standing up to injustice is possible even when it seems impossible. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I hope it reminds you that one person really can make a difference, and that the truth, no matter how hard they try to bury it, always finds a way to come to light. Take care of yourselves, and never stop fighting for what is right.